Borodowski from IDG that he's both a developer and a landlord. So we could get the kind of the insight to both. And then myself as a broker, I'm typically a middleman. So I get to deal with both the tenant and the landlord. And we have a wing that's property management. So we kind of see all the aspects of it. And then we want to cover any general questions or specific maybe questions or concerns that any of you might have. I want to kick it off to Andy if he wants to kind of talk about the legal aspects of lease negotiation and how he sees things from an attorney point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tomas. Again, I'm Andy Lewis. I'm a partner with Eisinger Law. Also a member of the executive committee and board member of the Aventura Marketing Council. I've been practicing law for about 25 years now. It's hard to believe. Still have my hair and it's not so gray, so pretty good. I primarily concentrate in the areas of commercial, residential real estate, sales, acquisitions, financing, leasing, and so forth, as well as focusing on condominium, HOA, and other community association law. So as you can imagine, during these extremely unique times, we've encountered various new and challenging issues in these areas of the law. A lot of interesting questions coming in from our clients. Now, in particular regard to commercial leasing, which is what I'm here, primarily to speak about. Many tenant businesses are clearly faced with financial hardships at this time, and therefore they're naturally looking for any possible way to cut their overhead and expenses to the greatest extent possible. One of the most obvious choices, of course, is that pesky little payment that comes due about every 4 weeks, namely the rent. And I've received questions from various clients and others over the past many weeks about what they can do with their commercial leases. Can we get out of it? Can we stop paying rent? Can we pay reduced rent? Can we abate our rent? And it's funny because I've gotten similar line of questioning from various unit owners and homeowners within our community association clients. Do we have to pay our monthly assessments while we're out of work or while we're furloughed? And the answers are really similar to one another. Yes, you have to pay your condo and HO assessments. Keep in mind your association has to pay its bills for insurance and security, maintenance, management, all that stuff. And you and your fellow homeowners are the sole source of revenue for the association in order to pay those expenses. And in a similar fashion, in commercial leasing, unless your particular lease provides something to the contrary, and just like in associations where the declaration of condominium or the restrictive covenants is the Bible, the written lease is the Bible. The law is very rarely going to overturn the contractual agreements between the parties. And so just like in the association arena, under a commercial lease, the tenant can't get out of his lease. You can't stop paying your rent. You can't pay less than the full amount of the rent due unless you're willing to risk being held in default by your landlord. The landlords, just like community associations, have their own expenses to pay, and they rely on the rents in order to do so. Not to mention the fact that, as many of you are probably familiar with, the payroll protection program, which was offered in the past month or so, basically gave many small businesses the opportunity to obtain what is essentially a completely forgivable loan that would cover not only your payroll expenses, but also your rental payments for a 2-month period. And the main idea behind that was so the tenants could continue paying their landlords and keep the economy moving. Just about all commercial leases that I've drafted or negotiated or seen are heavily one-sided in favor of the landlord. So you're not very often or even at all can ever find a force majeure provision in favor of the tenant, which is basically a provision that would allow the tenant to stop paying rent or to stop fulfilling its other obligations under the lease because of some act of God or other event that's beyond the tenant's control, such as COVID-19. Those provisions are generally left for being in favor of the landlord. They have certain repair and maintenance obligations under the lease, But if there's something that's out of their control, they can generally forego those responsibilities until it's reasonable for them to actually perform them. Now, with that said, a tenant can certainly try to renegotiate certain terms of its lease in an effort to ease the burden of the current situation. Although the landlord in any particular instance is likely under no legal obligation to participate in those renegotiations, they may be receptive to it, not only because of the obvious human side of it, but also because they may not want to take the ultimate risk of having the tenant completely walk away from the lease and then be stuck having to pursue rent through litigation. And keep in mind, for those of you who aren't aware, there's a moratorium on evictions, and in fact, it was just extended by the governor, I believe it was yesterday, extended to June 2nd, and who knows how far into the future they may wind up extending that. And beyond that, once that moratorium is lifted, I would anticipate a wave of evictions, foreclosure actions, garnishments, all of these great remedies that are out there for creditors to be filed all at once, and association lien foreclosures and so forth. And that can clog up the court system for who knows how long. And so a landlord's fear of this could certainly be a bargaining chip for a tenant. And although a tenant may not have a legal or contractual ground to terminate its lease or abate the payment of the rent, there are other things that a tenant could propose to a landlord. You can offer to extend the lease term for additional months or even years in exchange for a rent reduction or even forgiveness of rent for a stated number of months. You can try and restructure the lease so that the rent payments, let's say from March through June, don't have to be paid until an agreed upon date sometime in the future, without late fee, without penalty. You can see if the landlord may be agreeable to decreasing the base rent or forgiving the base rent for a certain number of months, maybe in exchange for some sort of a percentage rent arrangement, where the landlord, you see this a lot in strip centers, where the landlord takes a percentage of the retail tenant revenues, either the net revenues or the gross revenues, however that's negotiated, as additional rent, with the idea being that the tenant would benefit from that now by maybe getting a reduction or an abatement of that base rent right now, but maybe the landlord might benefit later when the tenant gets back on their feet and starts generating revenue through their business again. Another idea may be, for those tenants that may have a tenant allowance coming to them for tenant improvements, oftentimes that's negotiated in a lease where the landlord's going to give you an allowance to do certain build outs, to do certain improvements. Maybe your lease is just coming up for renewal and they're going to offer you, some money to repaint, to redo the carpeting, whatever the case may be. You can offer to relinquish some or all of that tenant allowance money in exchange for a corresponding reduction or abatement of the rent. But for any tenant that's an entity, if the lease is not already personally guaranteed by an individual, you can offer to provide that guarantee, such a personal guarantee in exchange for a rent abatement or reduction. You have to be careful with agreeing to something like that. If you were lucky enough to get a landlord who lets you have a lease with a single purpose entity that runs the business without requiring a personal guarantee, probably not something you want to give now, but if it would buy you a number of months of rent, maybe it's worth it. And of course, if the lease isn't already personally guaranteed, and if the tenant is already out of business or is about to go out of business, this may be a consideration for simply deciding to break the lease, because basically you have nothing to lose at that point. If there's no assets, if there's no if there's no personal guarantee by an individual who's behind the tenant entity. But keep in mind before you break your lease that the tenant entity, because you think the tenant entity doesn't have any money for the landlord to go after, the landlord actually does have what's called a statutory lien for rent under Chapter 83 of the Florida statutes against all the personal property the tenant normally keeps on the leased premises, like merchandise and inventory, computers, equipment, furniture, and so forth. So just because you may not have any money in the coffers doesn't mean that they can't go after all of the assets, and they actually have a superior lien against those assets. In the same vein, there's always the possibility, for a tenant to consider filing for bankruptcy. But in that case, if it's a tenant entity that would be filing for bankruptcy, then anybody who is personally guaranteed the lease would have to be, conscientious of how that could actually affect them if the tenant actually proceeds with filing for bankruptcy. But regardless, I'll leave that one to the bankruptcy attorneys. That's not really my area. But beyond that, I know Elaine wanted me to touch a little bit on whether it's a good time to invest in commercial real estate. I think there's probably some better experts on that here than me, but I'm not going to pretend to be a prognosticator of the real estate market. But in general, I would think that with the volatility of the stock market and with interest rates being as low as they are, that real estate is probably as good a place as any to park your money right now. And in the commercial property arena, you can do that, either through personal acquisition of commercial property or by investing in something like a REIT, a real estate investment trust, or a similar investment vehicle. Of course, as I discussed, there are many commercial tenants out there who are having problems paying their rent, and many have even gone out of business. So it's possible that over the coming months or even years, the ability to rent out space in commercial properties and derive revenues from those properties may be suspect. But as history tells us, over long periods of time, real estate tends to appreciate in value, and therefore it's typically a good long-term investment, even if it may not be profitable in the short run. The real issue there is, as it's always been, an investor's financial ability to carry the property during high vacancy, low revenue times for commercial properties, carrying costs such as mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and so forth. But that's basically my spiel. So I don't know if we want to have other people speak first, or we want to field questions, but I'll leave that to Tomas.
I think you touched on a lot of very important parts, and I like that you spoke on the legal aspect as well as kind of the human aspect of it, of what the landlords, one thing is caring what the contract exactly says, and another thing is you don't want the property to be vacant. You're not trying to put businesses out of companies out of business.
Right.
Maybe Marcelo could touch on a couple of different points, then I'll speak, and then we'll have kind of the general forum. Let me do another quick introduction for Marcelo Borodowski. He's a partner in IDG, Innovation Development Company, and Innovation Development Group. And he is also a landlord at the same time. So Marcelo, I was wondering if maybe you could kind of separate both aspects, but maybe tell us what's your experience with the tenants, how are you dealing with tenants, what your feedback is, kind of an insider scoop. And then maybe afterwards, if we could talk a little bit on the development side, how you see things moving forward from this point on.
Thank you, Thomas. I believe Andy Lewis take all the points. He take all the speech. My speech, it's really good. You cover everything. I will add a couple of things. First, I am more optimistic. I don't believe. I don't feel like the court will be filled out with thousands of claims. I believe the people is taking the correct steps. That is talking, have communication with the landlords and tenants. My experience is that I was receiving calls from tenants and from landlords for the both sides, sometimes in the same deal. Somebody asking me, listen, I received this call from the tenant that is asking me for variance or whatever, and most of the people are paying. It's at least in my area in Aventura, and we are from Aventura Martin Council. I'm not sure about downtown or other areas, but my experience in our building in Buenaventura and what I am hearing from different leases is there are people that are still paying. They are, like you say, most of the people receive the government relief programs that help a lot. Actually, we apply for that and we receive it, means that works. the key is to have communication, and that is what I am seeing here. The other thing that I want to add to your point, Liz, is there are a couple of things that the brokers, and now I will transfer to Tomas, is sometimes could be a lease replacement. You know, somebody need to go out, and as you say, they cannot go out from the lease. And what they need to do is contact the broker and say, please find me a replacement or find me a sublease to help the situation in this particular moment. And I am seeing that a lot. You know, some people say, okay, I have more room now. I will sublease one of the office and help me with the rent at this moment. And you know, that's cover most of everything. You mentioned, but I wanna, you know, complement that with the term of the lease. You know, that's the key. Sometimes, you know, you are 2 months away from the end of the lease. You are in the middle of the list. That is important. You know, the keys from the status of what you are at this moment, the warranties and all this stuff, but you almost cover every single aspect. I only want to add again that I am seeing people paying, and I am seeing that the people that cannot pay or have some issues start asking. I see people that asking and have no problems. Because, you know, it happens a lot. You say, okay, why I will pay if my neighbor is not paying, you know, and they want to go out and say, oh, give me 2 months free. And the answer from the landlord point is, no, listen, you have all these steps that you can follow up. First, ask for a government relief. You know, if you cannot pay, I will allow you to pay as much as you can. Show me first that you cannot pay, and I allow you to pay as much as you can, and after that you owe me the rest of the money, but let's see how you pay later. That is exactly what the banks are doing with the landlords, us, you know. And I have that with the bank. You say, listen, these 3 months I give you a break, but after that it's not like a free. It's you owe me that money, but you will pay in the end of the lease, or in the end of the or in different steps, or in a different way. You cover also the improvements and the negotiation. If you are 2 months away from the lease and you cannot pay, maybe it's a good moment to renegotiate. You know, say, listen, there are 2 months, give me these 2 months and I renew for 2-3 years. But, you know, that's most of the history that I have, or the background that I have. Moving forward to the new, what I am looking at the future from offices is that have a correlation with this is I am seeing more flexible terms. You know, the people don't want to commit for long-term leases because they don't know, there are uncertainty in what happened with my company, and we will start seeing a lot of that, you know, and that's why I recommend to my co-landlords, let's say, listen, be flexible, because you need to understand what the company is going through. And that's one of the things, the flexibility of the space also, you know. The people don't know if the people will come back, or if they will need more space, less space. They maybe fire a couple person, but they are looking that they come back. And we need to be, as landlords, understand what happened with the tenants and try to be flexible in that aspect if we want to lease again. Other thing that I am looking at is, you know, of course, during all these years, we are trying to put more people in less space. And now we are seeing lately that we need more space between the person from physical distance. And we will see that the people will need more space for the same amount of people. That is a good thing for us. The other thing is the retail will be, I am looking that is changing a little bit to be more private and also traffic. I am seeing also one friend of mine that is in downtown that say, I don't want to be in crowd areas. I prefer more a boutique place. That is what I am seeing, you know. Other change that I am looking at, and I saw a commercial from WeWork recently, you know, will be more emphasis in cleaning, more emphasis in taking clean air, signage also, 6 feet distance, clean your hands, all that stuff are coming in. I am seeing that a lot. And I see another thing that is the technology change. All the companies will start doing connection, remote access to your office, a lot of video conference like this, that will change a little bit about the offices, soundproofing, you don't want to be disturbed, you want a good connection with the internet, good cameras. The virtual meetings is something that I believe that will be staying, and that is a technology change that we will see in the offices. But to close my conversation, I believe the offices will not disappear. Collaboration and human connection is still vital for productivity and creativity. And we know everybody's afraid of that, but I believe we'll be back because especially if you're in a company that needs productivity and need creativity, is the only way to have it.
100%. Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you.
That's a good insight. So I wanted to touch base just kind of regarding this exact topic and the lease negotiations and tenants and landlords. As I said before, as a broker, I'm kind of a middleman dealing both, sometimes representing the landlord, sometimes representing the tenant, and a lot of times being a transaction broker, so literally being the middleman between both parties. And what we see is, as Andy was saying, even though the contracts, at the end of the day, the contract and the leases is what really counts when we look at the court aspect of it, I think we're seeing a very big human element. And I myself, we have between the different plazas around 150,000 square feet of retail spread throughout Dade County and Broward. And literally in all of our plazas with the different landlords, we're working out, especially for businesses on the retail side, that some of these businesses literally are closed because the government just issued a close order. We're working with them in order to get together and kind of work through the situation. I think as a landlord, if you really see, and as Marcelo said, there's some people that are taking advantage of the situation and they could financially pay and they just decide, okay, I see in the news that some people are not paying, or I see my neighbor's not paying, I'm not gonna pay myself. That's one scenario. But for the businesses that really are having a hard time, or the small businesses that their store is closed, the landlord is working with them in order to get through the time, because you don't want, at the end of the day, create a huge vacancy factor in your own properties. Even though you could, as Andy said, you could hold them liable once the evictions process starts again, it's still a long process, and especially the courts will be backed up. So it seems that it's on both cases the best scenario to try to work out a deal. Even from the tenant perspective, we also have to understand that the landlord has to pay mortgages. They're a carrying cost, as Andy said, of every property. And what we have been doing in a lot of cases is, at minimum, having the tenant cover the CAM, which is the common area maintenance. That way it gives a little bit relief to the landlord, because at the end of the day, you don't want to start defaulting on your loans. You don't want to start defaulting on your mortgage. And then it creates a bad experience or a bad situation for the whole plaza, because then it could literally go into foreclosure. You could start the legal aspect from the bank side of it. So I'm seeing a lot of times people meeting outside of some very specific scenarios of some properties that are very landmark properties that the landlords are saying, look, I'm not giving away any dollar. You have to pay me at the end of the month. And if you don't pay me at the end of the month, you will be evicted from the property. Those are very key properties that I can name probably in one hand throughout South Florida. I think that everybody else on the retail side is kind of working. And one of the key things that Marcelo said, communication is key, both from the landlord side and from the tenant side. If one person just stops picking up the phone or stops saying what their experience is business-wise, I think it creates a big negative factor, and that's when sometimes legal act start being processed. I think that if there are communications there, most people, as I said, they're able to work something out to either owe some rent or forgive certain parts, or as both Marcelo and Andy said, work out something beneficial for the future. Meaning, if you can't pay right now, okay, I'll extend my lease, and you have a tenant for a longer period of time. I think those are some key aspects. Then I wanted to touch also, and then now it's a point that I wanted everybody kind of to get involved, but I wanted to touch in the general real estate aspect, not so much from just the leasing or lease negotiation part. I think that it's very important to kind of differentiate that this was a health crisis. It was not a real estate crisis. Real estate is linked to it because things go hand in hand, but in what we saw in 2008, what's going on due to unstable lending, the real estate market basically crashed, and they changed the lending because of that. Right now, we're seeing real estate being affected because people can't go to work. There's an all-time highest unemployment, but it doesn't mean that real estate before wasn't going strongly, and it won't, once this is resolved, it won't go back there. When we talk about if it's a good time to buy, I think that it's an interesting time to try to, if you have the power and the budget to negotiate deals and to maybe carry properties that right now might not be producing as much as they typically would. I think it's a very interesting time to negotiate more aggressively to get better terms and to still move forward, because what we see historically, and especially in Miami and South Florida, this is a place that's very resilient. We see the properties bounce back in a much shorter period of time than the rest of the United States, because we're really an international background. We have, right now, we have New York and other very big cities, very densely populated cities, that they're gonna be coming down here more than ever. I think that people in New York and in those states were already being affected by the personal taxes and rent controls of different aspects. And right now, when they realize that I'm stuck in an apartment in Manhattan and I can't walk out of my house without bumping into 10,000 people, and I have a kid and I'm stuck in a 1,000 square foot cubicle, now they say, okay, I've been vacationing in Miami, now it's really a good time to kind of calm down. And I think that that's gonna ripple down in both the residential aspect of it and also the commercial aspect, whether it's office, whether it's retail. I think a lot of new businesses in the coming months and the coming years are really going to be wanting to relocate to places that have more natural air, more space in between, but are still cities. I think that we're a great point in between to what New York is, and at the same time, we're not North Carolina, that you're in the middle of the woods. So it's a very interesting time. It is a volatile time, but those people, as we see historically, that kind of take advantage of time like this and look at it with without so much emotion and look at the business aspect of it, I think that's an interesting time to kind of take advantage of a negative and try to use it as kind of a positive. I wanted to kind of leave it open to see if anybody has general questions, any concerns, any comments regarding to how they see the real estate market, any leases that they're trying to negotiate, or anything that they're dealing with from either tenant, landlord, or legal aspect. I think that we have a good panel to kind of maybe address those questions or issues.
Yeah, Thomas, we actually have a chat question here, if you want me to address that first.
Sure, please.
I think it's from Elaine. We have a security deposit, first month rent sitting with landlord. I asked landlord to consider that. He said he spent it already. Is that legal? Pretty much. It's going to depend on your lease, but I've never seen a lease that doesn't say that the landlord can't take the security deposit and apply it toward the rent if the rent isn't paid. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's legal. And they're really doing it for your benefit as the tenant. They're saying, okay, I'll apply the security deposit. And now if you put a hole in the wall, they're the ones at risk. They don't have a security deposit. They're applying it toward your rent. Now it's your obligation to replenish that security deposit. And that's pretty much what every commercial lease says. You're
Okay.
muted. Oh, no, you're.
All right, thank you. I had a feeling everything, I know most leases are certainly geared towards the landlord, so yes. But I had to ask the question.
Yeah. Good one.
Yeah.
We have a hand over here. Who's Rita? You want to, Michael?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Interesting times. And thank you for your presentation and your the information. It's very valuable. I'm one of 3 resi brokers on this chat with Lori and Martha, and we've all been really busy. I know that. And I like what Tomas said, that this is a health crisis, not a real estate crisis. Absolutely. Getting flooded with calls like, I want to buy, which is great. What I was concerned about with the commercial opportunities, because I do commercial as well, is do you see any kind of, and this is for Tomas and anybody else in the commercial realm, are there certain types of commercial that are being more impacted, and which are more opportunistic? Like, for instance, you have storage, medical buildings, strip malls, freestanding buildings, restaurants. Lots of national restaurants are going out of business and closing down. Is there an opportunity for somebody, say, that works with, that buys underperforming sectors of, it could be restaurants, insurance companies, stuff like that? Is there an opportunity now for those people to grab good deals where people are trying to bail out, to dive a little bit deeper into that, where, just to get an idea of opportunity moves? And if you know of big boxes that are closing down, I know that Nordstrom's is closing 9 stores. 2J's is out of business. Sage went closed before this all happened. Maybe there was a connection, I don't know. But get a little bit more information about the specifics.
So I think that's an excellent point. And for sure, there are different sectors that are definitely being impacted a lot more than others. You have the hospitality sector being hotels, which is one of the highest hit sectors altogether. And that's going to be something that already some big REITs and some funds that are liquid are going to take advantage of. The difficulty is that right now we're still in an in-between point. So as Andy said, the legal aspect of it, when you start actually seeing foreclosures and the opportunity come up, it's probably going to be 6 to 12 months from now. But I think that the hospitality and hotels are one of the highest hit. And then when you look at retail, that you see companies that right now, some big brick and mortars and big retail centers that have closed, for companies, Macy's firing 100,000 employees. I think what happened with COVID is basically it speed up. It gave us a fast forward of 5 years of what the retail sector was heading. Already with all the online shopping, retail itself is either it's going to be more interactive, meaning that it's either restaurants, it's either hair salons or goods that you have to get physically, or it's going to be more as an entertainment center, like Aventura Mall, and the shopping is just a secondary part of it. You're going to go just for the restaurants, you're going to go to walk around, have a nice experience, and then maybe you end up buying a pair of shoes or buying a t-shirt. I think big retail, especially when it's not owned by big corporations, so some of the smaller retail strips, to give an example, and this is not one that is hurting, but that type of plaza, like the arcade style plaza throughout Florida or even throughout the United States, those are going to be opportunities that if tenants are defaulting on the payments and there starts creating a high vacancy, that's what's going to be a time to step up and, like I said, maybe put aggressive deals and aggressive offers and take advantage of the situation. So I think that 2 areas most affected, and we see retail actually went down, I think it was close to 9%, 8.7%, which is the highest since 1990, which these are crazy, numbers. Maybe 8.7 doesn't seem so high when you just say it, but but these are very high statistics. So we are going to see ripple effects of it. And both in the hospitality for the smaller hotels, I think it's going to be definitely a time to start looking at assets and looking at things that maybe look a little bit decapitated and that they're not being kept so much, because that's going to be a good sign that the owners are probably hurting and to take advantage and start maybe contacting them. But it's going to be a process of keeping your eyes open, looking at the area around you and seeing what assets you see, whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, that you could see that they're not performing well, to maybe start contacting the owner and saying, look, we could step in, we could take over the property, we could kind of give you a bailout, so to call it, and kind of take advantage of that scenario in those sectors.
I would add to that also. I think an interesting opportunity or property would be one where you have these retail and restaurant businesses, but you also have a strong anchor big box tenant like a Publix that's not going anywhere. So even though all those surrounding businesses are going out, you know they're going to come back. It's not necessarily the same ones, but there are going to be interested tenants out there who are going to want to start businesses in those particular strip centers, because they know there's going to be traffic because of that big box tenant.
For sure, and it's all the service-oriented plazas. That's exactly what it is. When you have a Publix anchor, I mean, you have the pharmacies and even groceries are still performing excellent. So those are key anchors to have when you look at that. It's going to tell you that long term they're gonna be back. Because even though I feel like right now we're all somewhat scared to go out or to interact with one another, this will pass. I mean, like everything else that we've seen historically, I mean, we will get over it, and things will start kind of going into normal. The people that are able to go into contract or to negotiate right now where there's somewhat uncertainty are the ones that get obviously the better deals. When you wait for everything to kind of fall back in line again, you kind of miss the boat on being able to get really a more aggressive price. What I saw at the beginning of this, that there was a lot of uncertainty. I had kind of a surplus of clients calling me to put kind of ridiculous offers all across for different properties. And we saw that we're not there at all. I don't think we're going to get there because of this whatsoever. And the response that we were getting from a lot of the owners were literally, are you crazy? I mean, what are you basing these offers on? Now that things are settling, we see that we're able to maybe negotiate a little bit more, and we see that kind of adapting of the different properties. But it's not something that you're able to pick up buildings at 50 cents on the dollar or 40 cents on the dollar. But for sure, like you said, Rita, if you look at specific sectors that are more volatile than others, you are going to be able to get better deals right now. I don't think there's a doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Agree.
Any other questions or comments, concerns?
No question. Yeah.
One more. With the commercial entities like the mall, Aventura Mall, new extension coming on and all that, are these big, now that we're opening up, from what I understood, I try not to watch the news, but I did hear something about the Santa Crowd date is open, which is scary, scary. People coming into malls, I have a client who owns a company called Outform. They've devised a temperature checker. So it's this like the vertical stick kind of thing, so that when somebody's walking in, their temperatures, they're scanned and their temperatures taken before they go in. Do you see that, Tomas, as being something that's going to be present in mall entries? Or are people going to be coming in required to wear masks, wear protective gear, or is it just going to be a free-for-all?
That's a little bit hard to tell. It's kind of, I think it's more government related, that it's right now what we saw at the businesses that are opening up, restaurants, the ones that are going to be able to open, they're only able to operate at 25% capacity. So they want a lot of space. and a lot of places are requiring face masks. When you bring up somebody like Aventura Mall, they're a company that's very successful, and I think that they will take precautions on top of what the government requires. Like you said, maybe temperature checks, allow less density or allow less people, less occupancy than they regularly will have. But then we also see, like when they open up some parks in Miami, I believe they had opened South Point, and then you saw super crowded areas without people using face masks, and then they had to close it back. So you see that to a certain extent, it's not so much up to the businesses, but for each individual to take responsibility and to kind of try to keep themselves safe, keep their family safe, and to exercise social distance. But it would be great for companies or businesses to start implementing these new guidelines. Like Marcelo said, in the office sector, they're kind of doing additional things to circulate the air, to clean the surfaces, larger spaces with more airflow. So hopefully for newer projects, that's going to be the new norm. And for existing buildings or existing retail, they're going to implement things like you're saying, Rita, of temperature checks, sanitizing stations, or less occupancy.
Thomas, looks like Rita has a question.
Good morning. This is Rita Noah. Good morning, everyone.
Oh,
My
hi.
apologies, I jumped in late. Hi, Elaine. So to the other Rita, what I've heard in the news about the malls is the individual stores will require a mask, but walking around the mall is not what is being required. That's the last thing I heard in the news about that. Like Tomas said, Aventura Mall being a very lucrative mall, they'll probably take above and beyond certain more securities. My question is, as like I said, I jumped in late. I'm with the Aventura Police Department, by the way. I heard about the leases. I rented a property out, so I'm lucky so far my tenants have been paying. But on the investment part for commercial, you said, Tomas, about 6 to 12 months. What about on real estate investments? Where is a good time, do you think, to jump in and start investing in residential?
I think that right now, even on the residential aspect, since the eviction process was stopped, a lot of tenants are falling back on the rents on people. I mean, South Florida is prominent for having international buyers buy apartments and just lease them out as an investment. So when these people are used to getting rents every month, and all of a sudden they're not getting paid anymore and they have to pay for their mortgages out of pocket, they're going to be more inclined to sell. So I think that that's something that you got to start looking right now. When, like I said, the longer you kind of wait and you wait for things to fall back in line, the less when the owner of the apartment sees, or the owner of the house, let's say when you look at the residential side, that the tenant's paying again, they don't really have so much a need to sell anymore. But right now, if you take advantage and when you do the figures, you say, okay, I'm going to purchase this unit, let's say for $300,000, and I know I have to add on top of that price $30,000 to carry the property for 12 months. Worst case scenario. Now you're buying it for $330,000, but you're getting maybe a deal that typically is $450,000 or sometimes $500,000. And even though I deal with the commercial side of it, I see a lot of clients, myself being involved even in a couple of deals, taking advantage of those scenarios and saying, okay, I'm okay with covering carrying costs. And I believe in the market in South Florida because it's always shown us historically that it does bounce back. So kind of going in right now, negotiating the best deal possible. And I mean, putting a lot of offers on the table in order for one to get accepted, and figuring in the numbers. Okay, I'll cover the carrying cost for 12 months, 60 months, worst case scenario, but I'm still getting a very aggressive deal or a better deal than I was able to get, let's say, 6 months ago.
Okay, so don't wait it out then. All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Thomas?
I'm going to start dancing salsa.
Sarah?
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, in the chat room. In the chat room. Look in the chat room.
Okay. what is going on to, I'll just read it to everybody. What is going to be the backlash on determining businesses' value based not on what future business needs, but to the trades that are necessarily, that are a necessity, yet having no income for months, being unable to get into properties. AC, interior design, thank you. I'm going to read that again. It was a little choppy. Do you want to read that, Thomas, or do you want me to repeat that?
Could you repeat it one more time? I'm reading it here
Yeah.
because I'm not seeing exactly what the question is related to.
Yeah. So what is going to be the backlash on determining businesses' values based not on what future business needs, but to the trades that are a necessity yet having no income for months? Woody, are you online? Woody, do you want to maybe clarify your question?
Please.
Yeah. Woody, go ahead, Woody. You're unmuted. Woody, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So you determine value based on what the income is and on value of the businesses. And the businesses have not had income, some of them for 3 months. They haven't been able to get into the properties. They have now their property, their business wants to go on the market, or it's been on the market. And yet their books are going to show for this year's income such a drastic drop in what the real value of the business is. So is it going to take a long time to catch up to that?
So I think that's a great question, but we have to separate that it's two sides. Businesses are usually valued with dividend, so meaning what they make, and then you kind of multiply depending on what it is, times 4 years, times 6 years, times 10 years. The real estate itself always has a value that you're able to use comps and use sales to gather what the actual real estate is worth. Now, if you're buying a business that's linked to the real estate, it does create a little bit of a harder determining factor of what the value is altogether. But when you divide it and say, okay, the real estate, let's say it's worth 1 million if it's empty, not putting the tenant or the business into effect. And then when you look at a business right now, I think that you would have to look at its history more than what it's been performing in the past 2 or 3 months, because that's not going to be a clear picture of what the business is worth. If, let's say, a restaurant regularly had a NOI or a net income of $500,000 a year, and all of a sudden right now it's only producing $5,000 a month or a fraction of what it's been doing, I don't think that you could base it on the $5,000 a month, and you have to go by what did it perform in 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, because that's most likely a guideline that when things fall back into place, that it should perform back to where it was or very close to that. If you are buying a business at this exact time, like I said, it's a time to take advantage and put an offer. Let's say typically it would be worth $5 million, maybe $4 million or $4.5 million right now is a fair offer, because you have to take into consideration what's going on. At the same time, I don't think any business owner would sell based on the revenue of 2 months that are completely locked down when they had a business that historically has performed well.
Thank you. No, I was more concerned when in the future when people put their business, this is not people that own buildings. These are people that are renting buildings and had a business, and these are the trades, and they want to sell a year from now. Their yearly, people are going to forget, and their yearly income is going to be based on the last 3 years. And then we've got to also take into account how devastating this has been. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course. In that aspect, I think that people, even though, let's say a year from now, we're back to regular business and regular daily life, I think that when you look at a book and somebody wants to sell a business that's underperforming, people will somewhat understand that for, let's say, 6 months, the business didn't perform as well as it was doing the years before, and it shouldn't affect too much the value of the business, as long as it was able to recuperate and is doing again what it did, let's say, in 2019.
No doubt.
Looks like Martha has a question. Martha?
Well, it's not a question. It's just to add a little bit about the what Thomas was saying, is that you have to basically study a case by case and industry by industry, because from now forward you have to see what that specific industry is going to do, because the playing field is changing. So there's several things that you need to take in consideration when trying to value that business.
For sure.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for either anyone on the panel? No? Okay. Well, I can tell you, Thomas, and actually everybody, Marcelo and Andy, very, very powerful information, very good tips for everybody who's interested in going forward in real estate. If there's no other questions, please look out for the future meetings. There's a lot of good ones, as Elaine had previously said at the beginning of the meeting. And Thomas, anything, or Andy or Marcelo, any closing remarks that you'd like to share before we say goodbye?
Just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Andy, for taking the time and joining us today and giving us your insight. Thank you, Elaine, obviously, for setting up these wonderful panels, and everybody that took the time to join us to listen in.
Very good. Andy, Marcelo?
Thank you, Mike.
everybody.
Yep. Thanks for setting it up, and appreciate everyone's time, and stay safe.
Yeah.
Marcelo?
No, thank you, everybody.
Very
Great
good.
meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next meeting. Have a great week.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank
Have a great
you.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. A weekend. Yay.
Wonderful information.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. That was Phyllis.